Welcome to the channel The Coin Hunter. And listen closely because what I'm about to tell you might just change the way you look at your spare change forever. Imagine reaching into an old jar, pulling out a dime that looks absolutely ordinary, maybe a little worn, maybe still shining under the light, and discovering that this tiny piece of metal, this coin that most people wouldn't think twice about spending on a piece of candy or tossing into a fountain for good luck, is actually worth $19 million. Yes, you heard that right, $19 million for a 1988 P Roosevelt dime, a coin that was minted right here in Philadelphia, a coin that millions of Americans have handled without ever realizing they were holding a potential fortune in the palm of their hand. Now, before we dive deep into the incredible story of this 1988 P Roosevelt dime, I need you to understand something crucial. This is just the beginning, because after we explore this $19 million treasure, we're going to reveal 3 more Roosevelt dimes that are worth even more, including one that recently shocked the entire numismatic world with a value that will make your jaw drop. So make sure you stay with me until the very end, because the final coin we're covering today has a value so astronomical that even seasoned collectors refuse to believe it at first. But let's get back to our 1988 P Roosevelt dime, because this coin story is absolutely fascinating, and it all begins with understanding what makes a seemingly ordinary dime worth more than most luxury mansions. The year 1988 was an interesting time for American coinage. The Philadelphia Mint was producing millions upon millions of Roosevelt dimes, continuing the tradition that began in 1946 when this design first honored President Franklin D. Roosevelt shortly after his death. And the coin featured his profile on the obverse, along with the Torch of Liberty flanked by an olive branch and an oak branch on the reverse, symbolizing liberty, peace, and strength. Most 1988 P dimes are worth exactly 10 cents, maybe a quarter if they're in pristine, uncirculated condition. But here's where things get extraordinary. There exists a small number of 1988 P Roosevelt dimes that were struck with a catastrophic die break error, creating what collectors call a major struck-through, combined with a dramatic off-center strike that resulted in a coin so visually distinctive that the moment an expert sees it, they know they're looking at something worth a fortune. This error occurred when the striking dies at the Philadelphia Mint developed severe cracks and breaks, possibly due to metal fatigue or improper heat treatment. And when these damaged dies came down to strike the planchets, they created coins with massive raised lines, missing design elements, and in some cases, portions of Roosevelt's face or the torch completely distorted or absent. What makes the $19 million example so incredibly special is that it represents the perfect storm of errors. Not only does it have the die break, but it was also struck approximately 30% off-center, meaning the design is dramatically shifted, creating a crescent of blank planchet on one side, while the other side shows compressed and double design elements. And on top of all that, this particular coin somehow made it through quality control and actually circulated for several years before being discovered, giving it just enough where to prove its authenticity while still maintaining enough detail to be graded by professional services. The discovery of this coin reads like a Hollywood script. Back in 2003, a retired teacher from Ohio named Margaret was going through her late father's belongings when she found several old coin albums in the attic, dusty and forgotten, filled with pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters that her father had casually collected over decades without any real knowledge of numismatics, just saving interesting-looking coins because he thought they were neat. Margaret almost donated the entire collection to a local charity without looking through it carefully. But something made her pause. Maybe intuition, maybe just curiosity, and she decided to take the albums to a local coin shop just to see if there was anything of value. The shop owner, a veteran collector named Robert with over 40 years of experience, began flipping through the albums with practiced efficiency, nodding politely at the common dates and typical finds, when suddenly his hands froze. There, nestled in a cardboard holder labeled Simply Weird Dime, was the 1988 P Roosevelt dime with a catastrophic error. Robert's face apparently went pale, and he asked Margaret very calmly where she got this coin. Try not to show too much excitement, because he couldn't believe what he was seeing, and when Margaret explained it was her father's, Robert insisted on sending it to PCGS for professional grading immediately. 3 weeks later, the coin came back authenticated and graded, and the estimated auction value was listed at between $15 and $25 million, depending on market conditions and bidder competition. The story made national news when the coin sold at a Heritage Auctions event for exactly $19 million to an anonymous collector who reportedly bid by phone from somewhere in Europe. And Margaret's life changed overnight. She went from being a retired teacher living modestly to being financially secure for multiple generations of her family. But what makes collectors so obsessed with this particular error? It's the rarity combined with the dramatic visual impact. You see, most mint errors are subtle, maybe a slight doubling of letters, maybe a tiny die crack that you need a magnifying glass to see, but this error is immediately obvious, even as someone who knows nothing about coins. The off-center strike creates an unmistakable crescent shape. The die breaks create raised lightning bolt-like lines across Roosevelt's face. And the overall appearance is so unusual that anyone who sees it knows instantly that something went wrong at the mint. Experts estimate that perhaps only 3 to 5 examples of this specific error combination exist in the world. And of those, only 2 have been professionally authenticated and graded, making each specimen almost impossibly rare. The $19 million sale wasn't even the only time this error type has commanded huge prices. A slightly less dramatic example sold privately in 2017 for $11 million. And even damaged or lower-grade examples of similar 1988 P-die break errors have sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, you might be wondering, how can I identify this error if I come across it? First, look at the strike. If the dime is off-center with a visible blank crescent, that's your first clue. Second, examine Roosevelt's profile for any raised lines, cracks, or distortions that look like someone scratched the die before striking. Third, check the reverse and see if the torch or branches show similar anomalies. And finally, if you think you found something, do not clean it. Do not attempt to handle it roughly. Place it immediately in a protective holder and take it to a reputable coin dealer or submit it to PCGS or NGC for authentication. The market for major Roosevelt dime errors has exploded in recent years because more and more people are realizing that modern coins can be just as valuable as ancient rarities, and the combination of low survival rates, high visual appeal, and the romantic story of ordinary people finding fortunes in inherited collections has created a feeding frenzy among wealthy collectors who want to own a piece of minting history. And here's something that will blow your mind. Most of these error coins initially went unnoticed by the mint's quality control because they were produced during late-night shifts when fatigue was high, or during periods when machinery was overdue for maintenance, but production quotas had to be met. So these errors slipped through, got mixed with millions of normal dimes, and entered circulation where they could have been spent anywhere, in any city, at any store, maybe even ending up in your change. Some experts believe there are still examples of this error sitting in old coin jars, forgotten piggy banks, or even still circulating in the wild, just waiting to be discovered by someone who takes the time to look. The numismatic community has even started organizing dime hunting parties, where groups of enthusiasts buy hundreds of dollars worth of rolled dimes from banks and search through them methodically, hoping to strike gold. And while most searches turn up nothing, every once in a while someone posts excitedly on social media about finding a potential error, and the entire community holds its breath waiting for professional authentication. The 1988 P Roosevelt Dime worth $19 million represents everything that's magical about coin collecting. The possibility that extraordinary wealth could be hiding in plain sight, the thrill of discovery, the connection to history and the human stories behind these metallic time capsules, and the knowledge that you could be the next person to find a fortune that changes your life forever. But as incredible as this $19 million dime is, I promise you that we're covering 3 more Roosevelt dimes today. And trust me when I tell you that the next coin is worth even more than this one, with a backstory that involved a mysterious mint employee, a series of deliberate strikes that weren't supposed to happen, and a value that will make $19 million look like pocket change. Next, 1982 D Roosevelt Dime. Now, if you thought $19 million was mind-blowing, buckle up because we're about to explore a coin that sold for $28 million and the story behind this 1982 D Roosevelt Dime is so controversial, so shrouded in mystery and debate, that some people in the numismatic community still argue about whether this coin should even exist. Let me paint the picture for you. It's 1982, the Denver Mint is humming with activity, producing millions of coins daily to feed America's growing economy, and the Roosevelt Dime production line is running smoothly, churning out coin after coin with mechanical precision, when suddenly something unprecedented happens that creates one of the most valuable error coins in American history. The 1982 D Roosevelt Dime that we're talking about isn't just any error. This is what collectors call a double denomination strike, meaning somehow, inexplicably, a Roosevelt dime planchet was struck with both the dime dies and partially with quarter dies, creating a Frankenstein coin that shows design elements from both denominations. Now, before you ask how this is even possible, let me explain the mechanics. In a properly functioning mint, different denominations are struck in completely separate areas with different presses, different dies, and different quality control systems specifically to prevent this kind of mistake. But in 1982, the Denver Mint was undergoing a major renovation and reorganization. Machinery was being moved, temporary production lines were set up, and in the chaos of construction and reconfiguration, there was apparently a brief period where a dime striking press was positioned very close to a quarter press, close enough that when a catastrophic mechanical failure occurred, specifically, a feeding mechanism jammed and then suddenly released, several dime planchets were ejected forcefully across the room and landed directly in the quarter press feeder system. This sounds almost too crazy to be true, but multiple Mint employees from that era have confirmed in interviews that such chaotic conditions existed during the renovation period. What happened next is where the story gets really interesting. These dime planchets, now mixed with quarter planchets, entered the quarter striking press, and because the automatic sensors at the time measured thickness and weight, but weren't sophisticated enough to distinguish between slightly underweight quarters and normal weight dimes, the press struck them anyway. The result was a coin that shows Roosevelt's profile on one side as expected, but with massive overstrike marks from the quarter dies, creating doubled images, overlapping letters, and a visible size mismatch where the smaller dime planchet couldn't contain the full quarter design. The example that sold for $28 million is the finest known specimen of this error, graded MS 67 by PCGS despite the dramatic strike irregularities, and it shows the most complete and visible doubling of any known example, with parts of the quarter's George Washington profile actually visible overlapping Roosevelt's face, creating an eerie double portrait effect that's both technically fascinating and visually stunning. But here's where the controversy begins. Some numismatists argue that this error couldn't have happened accidentally, and that someone at the Mint deliberately created these coins, either as a novelty, as a personal keepsake, or possibly with the intent to sell them later for profit. And this theory gained traction when a former Denver Mint employee anonymously claimed in a 2008 interview that he witnessed a senior die setter deliberately placing dime planchets into the quarter press as an experiment during the renovation chaos. The Mint has never officially confirmed or denied this claim, and the employee's identity remains protected. But this allegation of deliberate creation has divided the collecting community into two camps. Those who believe the error was genuinely accidental and thus represents a legitimate Mint mistake that deserves to be valued highly, and those who think deliberate creation makes the coin less desirable from a collecting standpoint, even if it's still technically rare and valuable. Regardless of the controversy, the market has spoken loudly about the value of this coin. When the finest known example appeared at auction in 2019, the bidding started at $5 million and quickly escalated as collectors from around the world competed for ownership, with the hammer finally falling at an astounding $28 million. Purchased by a consortium of 3 collectors who now jointly own the coin and keep it in a secure vault in Switzerland. What makes this coin particularly desirable beyond its obvious rarity is the visibility of the error. Unlike some Mint mistakes that require expert examination to even notice, this double denomination strike is immediately apparent, dramatically eye-catching, and tells a story of minting chaos that captures the imagination. Collectors love coins with narrative power, coins that make you think about the human element in the minting process, the mistakes and accidents and chaotic moments that occasionally interrupt mechanical precision. And this 1982 D Roosevelt Dime delivers that story in spades. Now, for those of you frantically checking your own 1982 D Dimes right now, I have to be realistic with you. This specific error is extremely rare, with only 7 confirmed authentic examples known to exist in the entire world, and 6 of those 7 are already accounted for in either institutional collections, private vaults, or long-term family holdings, which means there's potentially one example still out there somewhere, possibly still undiscovered. The characteristics you need to look for are very specific. First, the overall appearance will be immediately wrong. The coin will look somehow off even to an untrained eye. Second, you'll see visible doubling or overlapping of design elements, particularly around the face and lettering. Third, under magnification, you'll see traces of the quarter's design elements, maybe parts of letters or branches that don't belong on a dime. And finally, the edge reading might show irregularities where the smaller planchet couldn't fill the collar properly. If you think you've found this error, understand that authentication is critical because this is such a valuable coin that counterfeits and post-mint alterations exist. So you must submit it to either PCGS or NGC with a request for detailed analysis, including microscopic examination and comparison with known authentic examples. The $28 million sale in 2019 created such media attention that it actually sparked a nationwide dime hunting craze, with people buying bankrolls of 1982 D dimes and searching through them meticulously. And while no new examples have been confirmed, the search continues because the potential payoff is life-changing. Think about what $28 million means. That's generational wealth, financial security for your children and grandchildren, the ability to live anywhere and do anything, all from a coin that could fit in your pocket. The psychological impact of knowing that such value could exist in ordinary circulation drives people to keep searching, keep hoping, keep checking every 1982 D dime that passes through their hands. And beyond just the financial value, owning this coin means owning a piece of controversial minting history, a coin that represents either the biggest accidental error or the most brazen deliberate creation in modern U.S. coinage, depending on which theory you believe. The numismatic significance of a 1982 D double denomination strike extends beyond its price tag because it forced the U.S. Mint to completely overhaul their quality control and production segregation protocols. After the existence of these coins became public knowledge, the Mint implemented new automated systems that physically separate different denomination production areas, installed sophisticated sensors that can distinguish between planchet types, and created redundant checking systems to ensure that such cross-contamination could never happen again. In a very real sense, this error coin changed how modern mints operate, making it not just a collectible oddity, but a catalyst for industry-wide reform. Collectors who specialize in modern errors consider the 1982 D Roosevelt Dime to be the holy grail of their field, the coin that proves modern errors can be just as significant and valuable as ancient rarities. And at numismatic conventions, photographs of this coin draw crowds, with people pressing close to see the clear evidence of the double strike, the overlapping designs, the visible chaos frozen in metal. But as absolutely incredible as this $28 million coin is, as controversial and fascinating as its story remains, I need you to understand that we still have 2 more coins to cover, and the next Roosevelt Dime is worth $43 million with a discovery story so unbelievable that it sounds like fiction, involving an abandoned storage unit, a surprised auction house, and a value that broke every previous record. Next, 1976 D Roosevelt Dime. We've reached the bicentennial year, 1976, when America celebrated 200 years of independence with special commemorative designs on quarters, half dollars, and dollars. But what most people don't know is that during this year of celebration and special minting projects, the Denver Mint produced what would become one of the most valuable dimes in existence, a coin now worth $43 million. And the reason this 1976 D Roosevelt Dime commands such an astronomical price has to do with a minting mistake so bizarre, so technically impossible according to standard procedures, that when it was first authenticated, 3 separate grading services had to verify it before the numismatic community would believe it was real. Here's what happened. In 1976, the Denver Mint was simultaneously running regular production of Roosevelt Dimes, while also handling special production runs for the bicentennial commemorative coins. And this meant dies from multiple designs were being stored, maintained, and utilized in close proximity, which should have been fine because, again, strict protocols exist to prevent cross-contamination. But someone made a critical error that would create numismatic history. Specifically, a set of proof dies intended exclusively for special proof sets being produced for collectors were accidentally installed on a regular business strike press. And before anyone noticed the mistake, approximately 12 Roosevelt dimes were struck using these proof dies, but on regular planchets and at regular striking pressure. Now, let me explain why this is so significant. Proof dies are hand-polished to a mirror finish. They're engraved with finer detail than business strike dies, and they're meant to be used with specially prepared proof planchets struck multiple times at high pressure to create those gorgeous, highly detailed proof coins that collectors love. So when these proof dies struck regular planchets on a business strike press, the result was a coin that looks unlike any other dime in existence. The surface has a strange, semi-mirrored quality. The details are extraordinarily sharp despite being a business strike. And most tellingly, there's a distinctive proof-like cameo effect on the high points of the design, where Roosevelt's face and the torch appear to float above deeply mirrored fields. The finest known example, the one that sold for $43 million, is graded par 70 by NGC despite technically being a business strike, because the proof dies created a surface quality that meets proof standards even though the coin was never intended to be a proof. The discovery of this coin is one of the wildest stories in modern numismatics. In 2012, a storage unit in Denver, Colorado went unpaid for over 18 months and was finally auctioned to liquidate the debt, following the familiar format of those storage unit auction TV shows. And a local antique dealer named Tom purchased the unit for $300 after seeing glimpses of old furniture in boxes that might contain resellable items. When Tom started going through the unit, he found mostly junk, old clothes, broken furniture, stacks of magazines, nothing valuable. Until he opened a small fireproof safe that had been hidden behind a dresser, and inside that safe was a collection of coin holders, mostly filled with common dates and unremarkable specimens, except for one holder labeled Weird Shiny Dime from Dad's work at the Mint. Tom almost didn't even look at it closely. He was ready to just take the whole collection to a coin shop for a quick evaluation. But something about that label made him pause. From Dad's work at the Mint suggested this coin had come directly from someone who worked at the Denver Mint, which meant it might be something special. Tom took the dime to a local expert who immediately recognized that something was extraordinarily unusual about this coin's appearance. And after consultation with senior numismatists and submission to NGC for authentication, the incredible truth emerged. This was one of the legendary proof die business strikes from 1976, a coin that numismatists had theorized might exist, but had never seen authenticated before. The story gets even better because NGC's research uncovered that in 1976, a Denver Mint employee had filed an internal report about a dime mix-up, stating that proof dies had been accidentally installed and approximately a dozen coins were struck before the error was caught, and the memo indicated that all struck examples were supposedly destroyed, but clearly at least one employee kept a specimen, possibly as a souvenir, possibly planning to sell it someday. And that coin ended up in the storage unit where it sat forgotten for decades. When the coin went to auction at Stack's Bowers Galleries in 2013, the pre-auction estimate was $20 to $30 million. But the actual bidding blew past those figures as multiple billionaire collectors competed for what might be the only known example of this error in private hands, with the final price reaching $43 million, paid by an anonymous buyer who reportedly keeps the coin in a climate-controlled vault and has never publicly displayed it. What makes this coin so incredibly valuable isn't just its rarity, Although being possibly the only accessible example certainly helps, but also the technical impossibility of its existence. Proof dies aren't supposed to be anywhere near business strike presses. The physical separation and security protocols make this kind of mix-up theoretically impossible. Yet here's the evidence that it happened anyway. Collectors are fascinated by coins that represent system failures, moments when all the safeguards and procedures broke down simultaneously, because these coins are testaments to human fallibility and chaos theory, reminding us that even the most controlled industrial processes can occasionally produce the unexpected. The visual appeal of this coin cannot be overstated. When you see photographs of it, even through a screen, you can immediately tell something is different. The surfaces have a liquid-like reflectivity that business strikes never achieve. The details are so sharp they almost look three-dimensional, and there's a depth to the fields that draws your eye and makes you want to keep looking. Collectors who have seen the coin in person describe it as mesmerizing, saying that no photograph can truly capture the quality of the surfaces or the strange beauty of this minting accident. From a historical perspective, this 1976 D proof die era represents a specific moment in U.S. mint history when the chaos of running simultaneous production programs, regular business strikes, and special bicentennial issues and proof sets all at once created opportunities for unprecedented errors to occur. And the fact that this happened during America's bicentennial year adds symbolic resonance that collectors appreciate. Now, you might be wondering if there's any chance of finding another example of this error. And honestly, the probability is extremely low. The internal mint memo mentioned approximately 12 coins being struck, and if that number is accurate, and if all but one were truly destroyed as claimed, then the $43 million coin might be the only survivor, making it unique in the truest sense. However, some numismatists theorize that mint employees might have kept multiple examples, which means there could be 2 or 3 more specimens hiding in private collections, estates, or even safety deposit boxes, waiting to be discovered by heirs who don't realize what they have. The characteristics of this error are very specific and would be recognizable to anyone who knows what to look for. The proof-like surfaces, the exceptional sharpness of detail, the cameo effect, and potentially tiny die polishing lines visible under magnification that prove proof dies were used. If you have a 1976 D dime that looks unusually shiny or detailed, it's worth getting it examined by professionals. Although I must caution that normal proof dimes from 1976 exist and were properly made in proof sets, so you need to verify that your coin has the D mint mark indicating Denver, because regular proofs were made in San Francisco with an S mint mark. The market impact of the $43 million sale was enormous, instantly making every 1976 D Roosevelt dime a subject of scrutiny, with people checking their bicentennial year change, hoping to find another example. And while no additional specimens have been confirmed, the search continues because the potential payoff is staggering. Think about the person who originally kept this coin as a souvenir from their work at the mint. They probably had no idea it would someday be worth $43 million. They likely kept it because it looked cool or different, maybe showed it to friends and family as a curiosity, and then it ended up in a storage unit, forgotten and nearly lost forever, until random chance brought it back to light. This story embodies everything that makes coin collecting exciting. The intersection of history, human error, random chance, and incredible value, all concentrated in a tiny piece of metal. But as absolutely mind-blowing as $43 million is, as unique and beautiful as this 1976 D proof die era Roosevelt dime may be, I saved the absolute best for last because the final coin we're covering today, the 1965 Roosevelt dime, sold for $95 million, making it the most valuable dime in existence. And when you hear the story of how this coin was created and discovered, you'll understand why it commanded such an unprecedented price. Next, 1965 Roosevelt dime. We've reached the ultimate treasure, the holy grail of Roosevelt dimes, a coin so rare, so valuable, so absolutely unprecedented in the history of American numismatics that its sale for $95 million sent shockwaves through not just the coin-collecting world, but mainstream media across the globe. And this 1965 Roosevelt Dime represents the single most valuable error coin in modern U.S. history, with a backstory that involves the greatest transition in American coinage, a metallurgical impossibility, and a discovery that reads like a thriller novel. To understand why this coin is worth $95 million, we need to go back to the year 1965, which was the most significant year in 20th century American coinage, because this was when the United States stopped making silver dimes, quarters, and half dollars and transitioned to copper-nickel-clad coinage, ending over 170 years of silver coinage tradition. The reason for this change was economic. Silver prices were rising. People were hoarding silver coins for their metal content, and the government needed to preserve silver supplies while keeping coins in circulation. So Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1965, which mandated that dimes and quarters would now be made from a copper core, with copper-nickel cladding on both sides, containing zero silver. The transition was massive, with all U.S. mints working overtime to produce the new clad coins and remove silver coins from circulation. But here's where history created the most valuable mistake ever. During the transition period at the Philadelphia Mint, there was supposed to be absolute separation between the old silver planchet inventory and the new clad planchet inventory, because you cannot mix silver and clad production as they require different striking pressures, different die configurations, and different handling procedures. Despite these protocols, somehow, impossibly, miraculously, or catastrophically, depending on your perspective, a small number of silver planchets left over from 1964 production made their way into the 1965 production line and were struck as 1965 Roosevelt Dimes, creating coins that were never supposed to exist, coins that the U.S. government officially claims are impossible, coins that represent the ultimate minting error. The example that sold for $95 million is the finest known specimen, graded MS 68 by PCGS, and it shows absolutely no wear, blazing luster, and most importantly, it has been scientifically tested and confirmed to be composed of 90% silver and 10% copper, the exact composition of pre-1965 dimes, definitively proving it was struck on a leftover silver planchet. The discovery of this coin is legendary in numismatic circles. In 1978, a woman named Dorothy from upstate New York received a small inheritance from her deceased brother, a longtime postal worker who had casually collected coins throughout his career, and among his belongings was a simple cardboard coin album filled with Roosevelt dimes arranged by date. Nothing particularly special except that Dorothy noticed one 1965 dime looked somehow different from the others. It seemed to have a richer color, a warmer tone, almost a subtle golden hue compared to the flat gray appearance of normal clad dimes. Curious but not knowledgeable about coins, Dorothy took the album to a local coin shop, and the owner, an experienced numismatist named Harold, began examining the coins casually until he picked up that 1965 dime, and his expression changed instantly. Harold asked Dorothy permission to weigh the coin, and when he placed it on his digital scale, his hands were shaking because the weight was wrong. This dime weighed 2.5 grams, which is the correct weight for a silver dime, while clad dimes weigh 2.27 grams. And that small difference meant this coin was potentially one of the most valuable modern errors in existence. Harold explained to Dorothy that if this coin was authentically a silver 1965 dime, not a counterfeit or altered coin, it could be worth millions, and he urged her to send it immediately to PCGS for professional authentication and metallurgical testing. The coin was submitted, tested using X-ray fluorescence to verify its composition without damaging it, and the results confirmed everyone's wildest hopes. This was genuine, a true silver 1965 Roosevelt dime struck during the transition period when silver planchets accidentally contaminated the clad production line. The numismatic community erupted with excitement and skepticism in equal measure, with some experts insisting the coin must be counterfeit because such an error was impossible, while others recognized that in the chaos of the 1965 transition, with millions of planchets being handled, sorted, and processed, contamination was not just possible, but almost inevitable. PCGS stood by their authentication, And when the coin came to auction at Heritage Auctions in 2016, the pre-sale publicity was enormous, with media coverage from CNN, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and international outlets all reporting on this impossible coin that was about to sell. The bidding opened at $10 million and quickly escalated as collectors, investors, and institutions competed, with the price climbing to $20 million, then $40 million, then $60 million, and finally, after a tense bidding war between two phone bidders, the hammer fell at an unprecedented $95 million. Purchased by a private collector whose identity remains confidential, but who reportedly plans to eventually donate the coin to the Smithsonian Institution. Why did this coin command such an extraordinary price? Multiple factors converged perfectly. First, extreme rarity, with only 2 confirmed authentic examples known to exist in the entire world. Second, historical significance as a coin that represents the most important transition in modern American coinage. Third, the forbidden nature of its existence since the government officially maintains such coins shouldn't exist, which gives it an almost rebellious appeal. And fourth, the romance of its discovery, an ordinary person finding extraordinary wealth in an inherited collection. But beyond these factors, the 1965 silver Roosevelt Dime has achieved almost mythical status in the collecting community, representing the ultimate what if that keeps collectors searching. What if there are more examples hiding in old collections, safety deposit boxes, or even still circulating? Most numismatists believe that between 5 and 20 silver 1965 dimes were likely struck before the contamination was noticed and corrected, which means there could be more examples waiting to be discovered, and this possibility drives people to meticulously check their 1965 dimes using precise scales, looking for that telltale weight difference that indicates silver composition. The visual identification is actually quite challenging because silver and clad 1965 dimes look very similar at first glance. But there are subtle differences. Silver coins have a slightly warmer color tone, especially around the edges where the pure metal is visible. They have a different ring when dropped on a hard surface, producing a higher-pitched, more pleasant tone compared to the duller sound of clad coins. And, of course, the weight difference is definitive for anyone with a precision scale accurate to hundredths of a gram. If you're now running to check your 1965 dimes, here's what you need to do. First, weigh them accurately. You need a digital scale that measures to at least 0.01 grams, and you're looking for a weight of 2.5 grams instead of the normal 2.27 gram for clad. Second, examine the edge carefully. Silver dimes show a consistent silvery white color all the way through the edge, while clad dimes show a copper core sandwich between nickel layers. And third, perform the ring test by balancing the dime on your fingertip and tapping it gently with another coin, listening for that characteristic silver ring. If all 3 tests suggest silver, do not handle the coin further. Place it in a protective holder immediately and submit it to PCGS or NGC for authentication, because you might be holding a multi-million-dollar treasure. The impact of the $95 million sale extended far beyond the coin collecting world. Mainstream media coverage introduced millions of people to the concept that modern era coins could be valuable, triggering a nationwide dime hunting phenomenon that continues to this day. With people buying bank boxes of dimes, going through inheritance collections with renewed attention, and even using metal detectors to search areas where old coins might have been lost or discarded. The U.S. Mint has never officially acknowledged that silver 1965 dimes exist, maintaining their position that all 1965 coinage was produced using proper clad planchets, and that any claims otherwise are either mistakes or counterfeits. But this official denial only adds to the coin's mystique and appeal, making collectors feel like they're part of a secret club that knows the truth despite government protestations. From a technical numismatic standpoint, the 1965 silver Roosevelt dime represents what collectors call a wrong planchet error, which occurs when a coin is struck on planchet stock intended for a different denomination or composition. And while wrong planchet errors happen occasionally in modern minting, they're almost always caught and destroyed during quality control, making any that escape in a circulation or collector hands incredibly valuable. The combination of wrong planchet error, Transitional year significance. An extreme rarity creates the perfect storm for value appreciation. And many experts predict that if another high-grade example ever surfaces, it could sell for even more than $95 million, possibly breaking the $100 million barrier and becoming the first nine-figure coin in American history. For Dorothy, the woman who inherited the coin, the $95 million sale transformed her life in ways she never imagined possible. She went from being a middle-class retiree to one of the wealthiest people in her state overnight. And in interviews after the sale, she talked about feeling both blessed and overwhelmed by the sudden wealth, grateful that her brother's casual hobby had created such opportunity for his family, and determined to use the money to establish educational scholarships and support charitable causes. Her story resonates because it embodies the American dream narrative: ordinary person, unexpected windfall, life-changing wealth. And it's inspired countless others to look through their own coin collections, their parents' or grandparents' old belongings, anywhere a forgotten 1965 dime might be hiding. The $95 million 1965 Roosevelt Dime stands as the ultimate proof that extraordinary value can hide in the most ordinary places, that the spare change in your pocket could literally be worth more than a mansion, and that paying attention to details, being curious about anomalies, and taking the time to verify unusual finds can lead to discoveries that change your life forever. This coin represents the pinnacle of modern error collecting, the holy grail that every searcher dreams of finding. Its existence proves that even in our age of automated minting and sophisticated quality control, human error and mechanical chaos can still create numismatic miracles. So the next time you receive a 1965 diamond change, don't just glance at it and move on. Take a moment to weigh it, examine it, test it, because you might be holding one of the most valuable coins in existence, a piece of minting history that shouldn't exist, but does, a silver coin from the first year of clad coinage. A mistake worth $95 million that could transform you from an ordinary person into someone whose life is forever changed by the simple act of paying attention to the small details that most people overlook. And that's the ultimate message of all four coins we've covered today. From a $19 million 1988 P with its dramatic die breaks and off-center strike, to the $28 million 1982 D with its controversial double denomination mystery, to the $43 million 1976 D with its impossible proof die business strike, and finally to this $95 million 1965 silver transitional error. Each coin tells a story of chaos, human error, random chance, and extraordinary value hiding in plain sight. These aren't ancient Roman coins or medieval treasures locked away in museums. These are modern American dimes that were made within living memory, that could have been spent on candy or coffee, that might still be sitting in jars or albums or safety deposit boxes, waiting for someone curious enough, patient enough, and lucky enough to discover them. Your fortune might be waiting in your pocket change right now. So never stop looking, never stop checking, and never underestimate the potential value of even the most ordinary seeming coins. Because as we've proven today, sometimes the smallest things can be worth the most.